Well, earlier this evening I spoke to the Deputy First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. I began by asking her if she could explain why the First Minister told Andrew Neil that he had taken legal advice on an independent Scotland's entry to the EU.
He didn't tell Andrew Neil that. I think any fair-minded person who reads the entire transcript of that interview would see that what he was doing was talking about the general debate. He cited a number of legal opinions. He was also talking about general government documents, all of which are underpinned by law officers' advice. He then, in that interview, went on to specifically say that he couldn't reveal either the fact of or the content of legal advice. It was interesting today that the...
No, he didn't say, he didn't in that interview say he couldn't reveal the fact of. He was asked very specifically, have you sought advice from your own Scottish law officers in this matter? And he said, we have, yes. Now, later on, you're absolutely right. He said he couldn't reveal the content of that advice, but he never at any point said, to my knowledge, that he couldn't reveal whether or not there was any advice.
But he said yes in terms of the general debate. And
that's not what he said.
He did use the word debate. It was interesting, the press release that Labour put out today took 27 words out of the quote.
Yes, but if I ask you, have you sought legal advice on whether Scotland would be a member of the European Union after independence, and you said to me, we have, yes, in terms of the debate, are you saying I would be wrong to take the inference that you were telling me you'd sought legal advice?
If you read the entire transcript, it's very clear that he's talking about, well, I think it is, and I've read the transcript, I think it's talking about the general debate, and he goes on to cite different legal authorities, and he's talking about government documents, Scotland's Future, Your Voice, Your Future, for example, all of which are underpinned by law officers' advice. That's what he was talking about. He was not talking about specific legal advice on the specific issue.
So when he was asked whether you'd sought advice from your own law officers on whether or not an independent Scotland would continue to be part of the European Union, and he said yes.
He was talking about the general government documents on the Constitution that we've published over the past few years, all of which are underpinned by law officers' advice. And if you read, I mean, you keep, well, Gordon, I'm sorry, but you keep reading one particular section of...
Look, I've listened to the whole thing. Look, let me put it to you this way. If I had watched that interview and gone into work the next day, and one of my colleagues had said to me, I heard that the First Minister said they've taken legal advice on Scotland's position if it was independent in the European Union. Is that the case? I would have said, watching that interview, yeah, it was. He told that to Andrew Neil on the politics show.
Why did Labour have to take? Why did Labour have to take 27 words out of the quote that they used? Because they had to do that in order to give it the meaning that they were trying.
And the important bit was the bit that they kept in.
I'm sorry, I've read the whole transcript. I think it's perfectly clear that he's talking about the general debate and these general documents, not what I was talking about in Parliament today, which was the specific advice we have now sought.
At no point in that interview does Alex Salmond say, Andrew, I cannot tell you whether or not we have received legal advice on whether Scotland's position in the European Union. Don't you understand, Andrew? I'm just talking in general terms.
He cites the convention, the ministerial code that enshrines that convention. I think it's
hopeless. He was asked a perfectly straightforward question. He gave a perfectly straightforward answer. And simply saying over and over again, no, he didn't say that. It's hopeless.
I've read the transcript. I'm not sure how many...
The viewers can go watch it.
Well, I hope they do. I hope people go and watch it or look at the transcript, because I actually think fair-minded people who do that will see that he was talking in the generality, not in the specific.
The problem you have over this, if this was Peter Mandelson or Tony Blair talking about the war in Iraq and they came up with some explanation like this, you'd be the first person who'd be hooting with laughter and saying, have you ever heard such a lot of old codswallop in your life?
You know, I'm sorry, I would encourage people to watch it, to look at the transcript, to listen to Alex Salmond in the Chamber of the Scottish Parliament today. He made very clear what he was talking about in that interview. And I repeat again, you know, if it was as clear-cut as you're saying, if it was as clear-cut as Labour were saying earlier on today, they wouldn't have had to remove 27 words from the middle of a quote. They had to do that in order to give it the meaning they wanted it to have.
Luke, I shouldn't have said that, and I'm sorry if I gave the wrong impression. That would be the easiest way to do it, wouldn't it?
He went to the Scottish Parliament today and he explained entirely what he meant. And I think people looking at that transcript will see that that is entirely what he meant. Now, I don't expect you to sit here tonight and agree with that. Otherwise, I'm sure that the interview would be a bit boring for viewers. But, you know, that's what he meant. And I think any fair-minded person watching it and looking at it would see it in that totality.
OK, so we've got Alex Salmond saying one thing and coming up with an explanation of why in close textual analysis it turns out you're saying something different. Then today you turn up having taken the Information Commissioner to court on the principle that you could not say whether or not you'd received legal advice and say, nah, we didn't.
Well, the principle that we disputed with the Information Commissioner, incidentally, is one that we're not conceding today. And that
yes, you are. By saying you haven't sought legal advice, you're saying you are telling us whether or not you've...
Well, perhaps if you go and read the Information Commissioner's ruling, you'll see that the principle in dispute is whether it is for the Scottish Government or for the Information Commissioner to take the final decision in these cases on what is or is not in the public interest. That's the point of principle. Now, we have got to the position today where, because of the statement I made in Parliament today, we do not think it is appropriate to continue to argue over that principle in this particular case.
So it was an important principle yesterday, but it's not an important principle today.
An important principle. It's still a point of dispute between the Scottish Government and the Information Commission in terms of the interpretation.
Why on earth did you get yourself into this position? Why didn't you just, when you got in this row with the Information Commissioner, you could have said, look, it would be improper for us to say, unless we consult the Lord Advocate, you know, he was hardly going to argue with you, was he? And you could have never, I mean, you end up in a court case. Why not just say, we asked the Lord Advocate, we haven't sought advice?
We're abiding by a convention enshrined in the Ministerial Code that is long-standing. Well, because we've taken the judgment that given the public debate over this, given the fact that the impression has been created that we had legal advice that ran counter to what we were saying and we were somehow concealing that legal advice, the public interest is now that we said what I said in Parliament today. Now, I think it's right that we've done that.
You seem to be enunciating an important principle today that flatly contradicts the important principle you were enunciating yesterday.
I'm not saying that at all. What we've done in this case is reassess our judgment on the public interest in light of the public debate. We have now are in a position where we are seeking legal advice because of the changed position of the Edinburgh Agreement, and I thought it was right today that I told Parliament that, and I got the permission of the Lord Advocate to do so.
What is even more extraordinary is that you didn't bother asking for legal advice in the first place.
Well, we have relied on legal opinion from some of the most eminent authorities in Europe. We're in a different position subsequent to the Edinburgh Agreement. Before the Edinburgh Agreement, there wasn't an agreed process between the two governments by which Scotland would seek and potentially achieve independence. There is now, and that gives us the solid context and the solid basis on which to...
This is starting to sound very reminiscent of Alex Salmond's explanation of why, when he told Andrew Neil he'd sought legal advice, he was saying something completely different. I mean, there was absolutely no reason you couldn't have gone to... I mean, it seems simply extraordinary you didn't go to your own law officers, given the row that was going on about this whole issue, and say, what do you think?
Well, we are doing that now because the position in terms of the process has been clarified by the Edinburgh Agreement. That gives us, well, our judgment is that it's right to do that when the process through which independence can be achieved has been settled. That's why we're doing that now. The white paper we publish next year will be entirely consistent with the legal advice.
So when Alex Salmond and others said in various debates in Parliament, it was quite clear that Scotland would remain in part of the European Union, that was just blather.
No, with the greatest respect, because there is no Scottish law officer's advice on an issue doesn't mean that there is not weighty legal opinion on such an issue. You know, I cited in Parliament today, I can cite to you just now the legal opinion from eminent legal authorities in Europe that backs up the position the SNP has long taken on the issue of European Union membership.
You've lost 2 MSPs today. Do you anticipate losing more over the NATO issue?
I would certainly hope not. Can I say, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that a day on which we lose 2 valued colleagues from the party is a good day. I'm very saddened by Jean and John's departure from the SNP. They're 2 people I respect. They were valued colleagues, and, you know, notwithstanding the difference of opinion over NATO, and the SNP had a very good, robust, democratic debate on NATO last week, but notwithstanding that difference of opinion, I look forward to campaigning with both John and Jean for a yes vote in the referendum.
All right, Nicola Sturgeon, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.